afternoon, traders. This is Christian Farmer, it's Traffic Trader Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Monday, September 8th. Before I get into the price action, I figured I'll just kind of go over some of the events for the week. It did feel like the markets were kind of a little bit quiet in the afternoon, really after the first hour of the day. Markets mainly traded in a bit of a range, and maybe that's because we do have a good amount of data that's coming out. Before I go over this, I'll give you the good news. The Fed is now in their quiet period, so no distractions from the Fed until the until the 17th. Where we will have the Fed meeting, and that's next Wednesday. So Fed in a quiet period. You won't hear from any major Fed speakers or Powell. Tomorrow, we're going to get the NFIB small business optimism, but really, I think more people are focused on this preliminary benchmark payrolls revision. So that number, who knows, could startle people, could not. I remember last year when this came out, there was a big revision to the downside. And I think that was the 818,000. So that's tomorrow. That's a half hour after the open. Then on Wednesday, you're going to get the PPI report. Remember the last month, the PPI report jumped. Market didn't react to it didn't have a huge move to it, but nevertheless, the number did jump to zero point 0.9. So we'll have to see if that's a one-off. What are they expecting? 0.3. Again, that's not tomorrow. That is Wednesday, and then Thursday you'll get the CPI report. All right, so that's just a couple things to watch. We also have some bond auctions. We did not have any bond auctions today, but we have the 3-year, 10-year, and we have the 30-year this week. That's on Thursday. Speaking of bonds, they were up another nice big clip today, up 1.3%. Was TLT. I want to get over to the so I'll go through charts as usual. For now or next, I'm going to just go over the price action. We'll go over that pretty quick in the leaders of the day. There's the TLT up 1.3%. I've got in my themes. The dollar was down today. The VIX was slightly positive, but we're sitting here at the VIX with only at a 15. So plus or minus 1%, not really a big deal at this point in the VIX. What else did well today? Cryptos had a good day today. Kind of felt like going into the open, we had a bit of risk on today. Basically, how the cryptos were reacting, as well as some of the other movers for the day, and then as I mentioned, things kind of quieted down a little bit. Interesting with the move in bonds today. What we have been seeing is areas like biotech, home builders, small caps have been doing really well. That was not the case today. The small caps actually moved down. I think around the low of the day, they were down about 0.5% down. There was really a pretty decent divergence between the Qs and IWM today, which came more in line as the day wore on. The Qs kind of came in from the highs, and IWM kind of came up from the lows to kind of balance things out. But in the beginning of the day, it was kind of an interesting or odd separation between the two. Regardless, both the small caps and the micro caps did finish up on the day. There's your cryptos. That's the crypto ETF that I pay attention to, plus Bitcoin, and I'll look at the Ethereum chart in a minute. Software had a good day. That was up 1.7% for the day. Semis also did pretty well for the day. The semis were up 1.1%. So that's nice outperformance for some of these higher growth areas of the market. Uranium stocks did well today. They were up 2%. And cyber stocks, which I thought were interesting today, had a pretty good day with a couple names shining there. The cyber ETF was up 1.6% for the day. China did decently, up 1.6. In fact, most international areas were pretty strong for the day. What didn't perform well, as I mentioned, biotech, utilities, which are actually starting to get to an interesting level. I might be interested in them if they keep coming down a bit. And then solar stocks took a breather today. They were down 1.6 today, along with clean energy stocks. All right, so let's get to some charts. Again, I'm just going to bring up the boring one first. Maybe you think it's exciting. I don't want to get anybody mad at me, but bonds had a very nice day. VPOC takeout on Friday, and that's another big move today, up 1.3%. Again, still, still until we break out of this gray box, it's still going to be kind of sideways. We were this high back in April, but I think that this is moving in the right direction and should make things a bit easier for some of the areas of the markets that are more fixated towards yields. So I've done it. I went over that I think enough in Friday's video. Let's go to the equity indices. Really, kind of like this is a really short term level to pay attention to, but I would watch when we start the week. We get a new value area for the week, which is on the 1 hour chart, and I do trade in the short term. I trade, obviously I'm more of a swing trader, but sometimes I will do a few day trades or trade in the short term. The level to watch here. So notice, I'm just going to get this is the value area for the week, which is based on all of last week's activity. And notice that we tried to break higher in the beginning of the day and just didn't have enough power to do it. Hence, it's why I brought up some of those economic events in the beginning of the video, because I think that the market may be waiting for that. But the breakout level to watch, out of the range for last week, which is 649.13. Again, that's all of last week's activity, not just the price. Obviously, the price is up here, but when you put together time and volume and price, the level to watch is 649.11 there. All right, so that's what I'm watching for SPY Qs, which started the day pretty darn strong, right against some resistance here. So you could see that that top of the value for the month is 579.10. So that's the level to watch there. Again, just to kind of watch the bigger picture with some of these things. I'm going to bring in here the 1 hour chart too. And you could see that same thing. We try to break out here. Couldn't do it out of this week's value area. Also notice that I'm not going to call this a double top, because that's way too early to do something like that. But just notice that we're kind of hesitated right at last week's highs. The level to watch there is 580. We'll just round there and say, round that number from 580.03 and just say 580. You could see when I put in the time frame of the daily chart, which has the month's value area, you could see that the top of the value for the month is very close to the top of the value for the sorry, this is for the month and this is for the week. All right, so you got two little levels of resistance to get through here today, and hence why I didn't really press too much today. I saw that we hit those levels, and didn't do much afterwards, even though a lot of movers in the first like half hour of the day, where it could have basically made your day. And then you could have, maybe went for a walk today or went to the gym, because I thought that there was some very interesting moves that happened for the first hour of the day. Let me get back to the daily chart. I think the one that people were most impressed with today was ALAB. Look at this move today, up 13%. And as far as I know, there wasn't any news on the stock today. I mean, that's just a humongous move on no news. Now, this was a nice technical pattern. I think I talked about this in Friday's video, had it on our weekly watch list. But hey, if you grab this stock on, if you even chase the stock out of the gate, you were rewarded. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes we see these big moves up and then we kind of revert, and sometimes the stock still finishes up for the day, but it reverts about like 70% of the initial pop. But this was not the case. This held the gains all day today. Very impressive for this name. I mentioned cyber stocks, which may be where I want to go next. Actually, let me stick with the I'm going to stick with the semis here. Just bring up the right spreadsheet, my spreadsheet here. CRDO, right, had strong earnings last week. Nice follow through, up 4.7%. This is a name that I own in the TTG trend portfolio. Pretty impressive. And again, I think that shallow dips are going to get bought here. Clearly, we're getting into overbought territory. The stock is now extended, so just be mindful of that. But I would be looking at that in my trading account for a pullback. Broadcom also had a pretty good day today. This is a tough candle on Friday. This had such a big move, but did not finish anywhere near the highs, but had a nice move today. up 3.2%. If you happen to get involved in this close to the close on Friday. Getting to a couple software names. I meant to go over this chart on Friday, but I did not. This is Unity Software, which has probably been one of the strongest names in software over the last couple of weeks. Reminder that Oracle reports this week. It's been getting some nice price target raises. I think this reports after the close tomorrow. Tuesday, yeah, after the close tomorrow. So this is going to be an interesting report, especially for the software group. I like the dip that's happened here. Of course, this name really ran over the last quarter until we got to about the middle of August, and then it kind of just ran out of steam and has slowed down, but it seems like there's some interest in it again. Remember, this company came out with guidance, like far out guidance, I think last quarter, which really drove some of the performance. So that's going to be an interesting report. I will probably put on some type of an earnings trade for this one. The announcements from S&P. Speaking of software app, which I did go long app, and I think I went over that in Friday's. I was doing the video on Friday, and I was talking about how I was long AppLab and that the announcements were supposed to be coming out shortly. And I purposely tried to finish the video in time so that I could see the announcements, which came out right around like 5:15. It's funny how they do that. They kind of put the announcements out like a little bit after the close, so some people are like shutting down their computers and maybe have gone for the day, and they seem to always release that right around like 5:15, right around when some people are leaving for the day. I know that that's been the case, and I was glued to my computer screens on Friday, but I had already had a trade on in AppLovin, so this worked really nice. I tell you, Hood had great follow through. I was not expecting that. Hood ended up 15%. Remember, usually how these S&P additions work is that they usually get the pop on the day of the announcements, and then it's kind of like a sell the news type event. You could definitely make money on the announcement, but usually they give it back. Just kind of crazy how that unfolded with Robinhood, that it looked like it was going to break down and launched higher. Sometimes we see that in terms of not just S&P announcements, but just in general, when stocks look like they're about to break down, and then they kind of reverse and they go back higher. Why do they do that sometimes? Well, sometimes they do that to kind of shake people out, right? They shake out the weak hands, and then they kind of move higher, especially with strong stocks like a Robinhood. Speaking of some of the financials, which I didn't really go over on Friday, but I like this SOFI here. Again, it might slow down a little bit because it's had such a big advancement over the last 4 or 5 months, but I like this. I also like some of these other names that are selling off a little bit, even though they're a little bit slower. I think the opportunities, like the red bars on some of these, are places where you want to get involved into something like a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman Sachs. Again, they don't have huge down days, but that's to me like where you want to get involved, especially with something that's kind of grinding along like this. Have to be buying these more at dips than strong green days. All right, that's a few of the financials. What else did I want to go over? IBM had a huge day. Unfortunately, this is my fault. I think I got long this name back on Thursday, I think, and I sold it on Friday in the beginning of the day on Friday, and it had a really nice day today. They were talking about how they've got a lot of quantum computing going on, and the stock was really nice. And congrats to people who held it. And to me, it was a very easy, it was a pretty easy trading setup. I thought maybe it might be breaking the 200-day moving average. That's probably why I sold it, which is where I wanted to go long it for a move above the 200-day moving average in the value area. But congrats to holding it. I thought it was a good setup, and it worked out pretty decently. Let's talk about a little bit about the China stocks. Speaking of names that didn't have any news to them, again, at least as far as I saw on Bloomberg, look at the move in BIDU today, up 6.6%. Um, Amazing. This is been a name that's been very dormant. So it's odd to me. Again, maybe I'm missing the news on it. I just didn't see it on Bloomberg, but that's a huge move. Considering this is a stock that really hasn't done much over time. Here's what the weekly chart looks like of Baidu. So you're into some resistance now, but again, if you kind of went long around this thing around, like, the bottom of the value area for the year, then this worked. Hence, the next one that I'm going to talk about is JD.com. Again, I don't really know. I don't have a fundamental reason to go long this name, but some of these names are just they're beginning to retrace, and we saw option activity in JD. I think it was like around. Sorry, I don't have it on the top of my head, but I think it was like 2 months ago in JD.com, and the stock really hasn't done anything since that, and I didn't buy any. Again, I think it was more or less like in here, where we saw this. It's like 2 or 3 months ago where we saw heavy, like, uh, January 2026 calls trade. That happened again today, and there's a lot of these calls that traded today. They're focused on the 40 strike, which is a decent way up here, and if it does move like like what Baidu did, of course those calls will work. They're very, like, inexpensive calls. I think they mainly went up for like $1.30. So again, 40's up here. What I did, it's just to participate, and again, this is not, I'm more of a trend trader. I don't like to trade names that are below the 200-day moving average. Now JD has been at least basing, but instead of going long stock, what I usually do for names that are underneath a 200-day moving average, where I want to give a shot to, kind of like a lotto, I will go ahead and buy calls. And I went out to January. I didn't do the 40 strike calls. I did the 37 and a half strike calls because they weren't very expensive either. I think I got into those for like a dollar, like $1.84. So anyway, that's a shot. Like, that's what, and I think in this market, the way it's been going, some of these things that have been dormant for a while have been going. And again, it's a bit symbolic of a bull market, where sometimes there isn't a fundamental story. Like, again, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I didn't see one on Baidu today. So, what can you say? When you're in a bull market, things like that are going to, perhaps, move up, and even if there's not anything major fundamental going on. Hence, open has been a big stock, and I just wanted to highlight this because I did the same thing last time, and I hope this helps, because I know some people are going to, uh, there's crowds out there that are just going to stay long no matter what, and they're not going to make adjustments. But if you're a trader and you're watching the video and you make adjustments to what you're doing, we had noted that, these VPOCs are really great to take some profits. And I had talked about on this last one at 550 that if you took some profits here, you were able to add back like about 15% lower. And I covered that in a video. I covered it on Twitter, and I said, hey, this would be a great place to take profits, and then you can kind of reload here. Right, that's the beauty of trading something that's in an uptrend, is you sell the rips and you buy the dips a little bit, and you're making more money than just sitting long, provided that the name continues to go higher. So what happened today? And again, this is something that we talked about in the trading room, that we've had a VPOC up here at 707. Boom, takes this out, took it out pre-market. I think it was trading, I don't know where it was trading pre-market, but I think it was like almost 720, I want to say. Yeah, around 720. So by the time it got there, right, so a lot of, this name was probably most talked about pre-market. So it hit that 720 level. Once the candle opened, there's your 707 takeout. And look at the stock sell off 9% today. So if you followed along and said, and are a disciplined trader and took profits around there, now the stock's back at $6. So you can add back that target, or if you want, you can wait, until we get to the top of the value area, which is about another 10% down. But that's what I would be watching. And if we do get down there to 545, what I would want to see is support to kind of hold, right? Like, we would get down here intraday, maybe fall into the value area, and by the close, you close above the value area. That would be a nice test of support, and that would be a nice little dip. Another name that I went over on from Friday's video was BLND, right? Which actually had a better day today. Remember, there's there was a huge amount of calls that traded, big call block that went up. This is Blend Labs, which is a software name that's involved in the mortgage industry. So I like to find new names like this. That's one of the things that's really nice about following option activity is sometimes you'll see a block of shares that go up, and you don't know the name, but you do a little digging and you're like, aha, there's a reason why they're buying a lot of calls in this. It's a mortgage, it's a play on mortgage, and it's actually a tech play on the mortgage in the mortgage space. In any event, made a nice move today, up 8.5%. I mentioned cyber names. CrowdStrike just hasn't been a name for me. I just haven't traded this too much, but did fall down to the 200-day moving average, and that's another place, kind of like the IBM trade, where it retook the 200-day moving average. This one is down to the 200-day moving average, and it's the same. You could keep it simple type trade and go long versus the 200-day moving average if you like CrowdStrike. I do like this RBRK. This is in the TTG trend portfolio, up 5%. Nice follow through. Did break itself outside of the value area and outside of this range. Good looking move there. Zscaler is another name, remember, that had earnings last week. Not the best reaction, but again, it's a bit of returned back almost to the earnings gap from last quarter. So at least this has come in a little bit, and I still have this name on as well in the TTG trend portfolio. Nothing on in my in the trading account. Couple other names, and that'll be it for this video. But I do like some of these names kind of coming down to support. I started a position today in MP. I think, and I left the ability to kind of add because there's a VPOC down here, which is about 4% down. So it's just kind of a starter position for me in MP. It doesn't have to take out the VPOC down here, but just like I was noting the with the open. Sometimes it's a better setup, like to sell into that. Same thing, it's a better setup to kind of buy into this, where I think that there's going to be demand, and that also lines up very closely with the 50-day moving average. So I try to make sure, and when I got into this trade, I try to communicate that, hey, I'm just going to be kind of starting. I put my stop down here because I'll probably want to add on a little bit more weakness. But again, there's no guarantee that it has to take this VPOC out. It could go up first, come in here and get rejected, and then come down and take it out. So there's a number of different things, but ultimately, I do like this name cooling off a little bit. And one other name too, is a name that I've been long. I think maybe since the beginning of last week. I think last Monday I got long this name, CGNX. I like how it's setting up here in relation to like how names have been, some of these high growth names have been going, where they kind of consolidate a little bit, and then the 5-day moving out, they tend to kind of hang in here, but they don't go below the 5-day moving average. That is usually a sign that this could break higher here. So I'm watching for a break out of the value area tomorrow or this week, and that level is 44.91. All right, guys, that's it.